Welcome to MTG Friends, I'm Ryan, and in this episode we're going to be doing Hate Boars in Paradise. It is Commander deck tech for Yasharn Implacable Earth. So, let's just jump right in and start with the Commander. Alright, Yasharn. He is, when Yasharn enters the battlefield, search your library for a basic forest card and a basic plains card, reveal those cards, put them into your hand, then shuffle your library. But more importantly, players cannot pay life or sacrifice non-land permanents to cast spells or activate abilities. I love it. So what is kind of cool about this is this includes things like fetch lands that cost 1 life to sack and pull a card. So nope, not with Yasharn out. So no, ain't happening. So once again, players can't pay life or sacrifice non-land permanents to cast spells or activate abilities. So there's just a lot of hate rolled up into this card. I love it. I love it. So we have some categories here. We have Hydras, which it isn't necessarily Hydra per se, but it is anything dealing with +1/+1 counters. Got our mana ramp package. We got what I call the Shenanagans list, because it's just filled with shenanigans. Win cons, some of those end-of-game win con conditions. Then we have our land package. We have our draw package, as well as what are considered staples. And then we have a couple of to-note maybe boards, which actually isn't a maybe board. It is subs for budgetary reasons for certain specific cards, because this is an expensive deck, an expensive build, and there are lots of alternatives and budget things that you can do to make this a more affordable, more budgetary Commander deck to play. All right, so let's jump in and let's start with the Hydras build portion. All right, Felidar Retreat. This is new. This is right out of Zendikar Rising. One of the strongest sets to come out in a handful of years. Landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, choose one. Create a 2/2 white cat beast creature token, or put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. Those creatures gain vigilance until end of turn. Fantastic. Oh my goodness, this thing is powerful. Hangerback Walker XX 0/0. Hangerback Walker enters the battlefield with X 1/1 counters on it. When Hangerback Walker dies, put a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying onto the battlefield for each +1/+1 counter on Hangerback Walker. 1 tap, put a 1/1 counter on Hangerback Walker. So we got a lot of +1/+1 generation in this build, and as well as, doubling seasons and that kind of thing. Plus, when you're dealing with Wrath of Gods and board clears, this is going to give you board presence after the fact. All right, next. Colonial Hydra for 5. This is one of the few Hydras we have in this build that isn't an X green. Where X is the amount of counters. Trample. Colonial Hydra enters battlefield with 4 1/1 counters on it. Whenever Colonial Hydra attacks, double the number of +1/+1 counters on each creature you control. Self-explanatory. This is a beast. Well, technically it's not a beast, it's a Hydra. Oran Reef Hydra for 5. Another one that doesn't have X, which I just contradicted myself, but most of the rest of them do have an X green. Trample Landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, put a 1/1 counter on Oran Reef Hydra. If that land is a forest, put 2 1/1 counters on Oran Reef Hydra, and it starts as a 5/5 already. Now we have a lot of mana ramp in this build, so we're not going to have a hard time getting to 5 drops at all. So next up, Primordial Hydra. See, I told you there was going to be an X in there. There we go. X green. Primordial Hydra enters the battlefield with X +1 counters on it. At the beginning of your upkeep, double the number of 1/1 counters on Primordial Hydra. Holy moly. You got, like I said, and I'm not going to mention this too many times until we get into the enchantments, but putting doubling season in play when this comes in, shnikes! Primordial Hydra has trample as long as it has 10 or more 1/1 counters on it. This is not going to be a challenge to get 10 of them on there. Protean Hydra, X green. Protean Hydra enters the battlefield with X/1/1 counters on it. If damage would be dealt to Protean Hydra, prevent that damage and remove that many +1/+1 counters from it. Whenever a 1/1 counter is removed from Protean Hydra, put 2 1/1 counters on it at the beginning of the next step. So as long as it survives the turn, it's going to double up its counters. So basically, if it comes in as 4/4, for example, it needs to have less than 4 damage given to it, and then all sorts of craziness happens, because then let's say it has 3 damage put on it, then it's going to double those at the end. Oh, tasty vittles, man. Tasty vittles. Scavenger Ooze is in here to deal with a few things. Well, it is a 2-drop, so you're going to get it on the board fairly quickly. But even if you don't get it in on the board fairly quickly, you can start exiling your opponent's cards and get +1/+1 counters on it, and you're gaining a little life. Just an added extra bonus. Always love cards that give you multiple things that it does. Shalai, Voice of Plenty, Chalet, whatever, however you pronounce this. It's a 4-drop, 3/4. Not the best stats, although decent stats for a flyer. But you planeswalkers you control and other creatures you control have hexproof. Fantabulous. But even better, for 6, which is not going to be difficult again, is put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. Yummy. Undergrowth Champion. Not an expensive card in terms of finances. Not an expensive card in terms of mana cost. It's a 3-drop 2/2. If damage would be dealt to Undergrowth Champion while it has a 1/1 counter on it, which is very likely, prevent that damage and remove a 1/1 counter from Undergrowth Champion. Landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, put a 1/1 counter on Undergrowth Champion. What can I say about this card? It is just a house. Or it becomes a house. Speaking of houses, Vigor. It's a 3 green trample 6/6 bad boy. It is on here for a couple reasons. One, it's beefy, but it helps. It is a sport card. If damage would be dealt to another creature you control, prevent that damage. Put a 1/1 counter on that creature for each 1 damage prevented this way. When Vigor. I don't know why I said Vigor, is put into a graveyard from anywhere, shuffle it into your owner's library. Yes, sir. Thank you. May I have another? I love this card. Walking Ballista. There is another card that we are going to come into that makes this infinite damage to your opponents if it does not get interrupted. But just on its own, it is a wrecking ball. Walking Ballista enters the battlefield with X/1/1 counters on it. For 4, put a 1/1 counter on Walking Ballista. Remove 1/1 counter from Walking Ballista. It deals 1 damage to any target. We will get to that later with the combo. It is a relatively expensive card. It is not a replaceable card. You either want to run this or because you have it or you don't. But you should run this in this build, especially with the other card we'll talk about later. Doubling Season. Most everything most everything is supported around this deck with Doubling Season. It's not going to kill you to sub it out, but let's explain first. If an effect would create 1 or more tokens under your control, it creates twice that many of those tokens instead. If an effect would put 1 or more counters on a permanent you control, it puts twice that many on it, on those counters on that permanent instead. This is a staple. This is absolutely vital to this deck. There really isn't much of a substitute to this card, but there are some second bests that you might be able to play. I highly recommend you put the money into getting this card. It will be utilized both for token generation and for +1/+1 counter generation. Enlightened Tutor. If you got it, play it. If you don't have to put this in. But a tutor is a tutor. You could probably put in that cheaper Idyllic Tutor, I believe is what it's called. That is much cheaper. It just came out in, I believe, Core 20, possibly. Search your library for an artifact or enchantment card and reveal that card to all players. Shuffle your library and put the revealed card back on top of it. Oh, to fetch for that doubling season we were just talking about. Or a few others that we'll get to. Force of Vigor. 2 green. If it's not your turn, you may exile a green card from your hand rather than pay this spell's mana cost. Destroy up to 2 target artifacts and or enchantment. So just kind of stabilizing the board when you need it. And oh, is it fantastic to not have to spend mana on something. The Force series, the Force of Will, the Force of whatever the other ones. Force of Will and Force of Vigor are like the 2 big dogs for sure. These are just great cards. If you don't have it, you don't want to spend the mana, budgetary reasons, you can replace this certainly with something else that does this decently, Crows and Grip, others that remove artifacts, enchantments. But this is especially powerful because it removes 2 and it could theoretically cost you 0 when you're tapped out. Oh, Genesis Wave. What do we need to say about this? X green. Reveal the top X cards of your library. You may put any number of permanent cards with converted mana cost X or less from among them onto the battlefield. Then put all cards revealed this way that weren't put onto the battlefield into your graveyard. Just an amazing card. Self-explanatory what it does. I mean, converted mana cost X or less from among them onto the battlefield. It's just a great card. Green Sun's Zenith, also a fantastic card. X green, search your library for a green creature card with converted mana cost X or less, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Shuffle Green Sun's Zenith into its owner's library. Not really a replaceable card. You don't have to run it. If you don't have it, don't run it. You can certainly put in some other instants or sorceries that can support this kind of a build. Next up, Heroic Intervention. This has actually gone down a little bit in price because of the reprint. So it is permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. This is just flat out great protection. You want to run this card if you can, if you're in green. Absolutely. Manglehorn, he does multiple things, which is why he's in here. He's only a 30-cent card, so absolutely put this in a green build. This is a green-white. When Manglehorn enters the battlefield, you may destroy target artifact. Yes, please. Artifacts your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. Oh, that's insulting, isn't it? Having their stuff enter tapped is just, it's chuckle-worthy. Chuckle-worthy. Nature's Claim. Destroy target artifact or enchantment its controller gains 4 life. This is mainly in here because it's only going to cost you 1, and it is super effective for what it does. And not expensive. Noxious Revival. It is put target card from a graveyard on top of its owner's library. This is just an incredibly powerful green card. It costs you nothing. Well, technically it costs you 2 life. And you get to put a target card from a graveyard on top of its owner's library. Now you can put one of your own targets on there. You don't have to put yours. So, by all means, run this card. If you don't have it, you don't want to spend the money on it. It's going to run you about $11. It is a staple card. I recommend you go out and you get it. There's other things that you can run. At your discretion, for sure. Sword of Plowshares. Run this card. It's exile target creatures, controller gains life equal to its power. It's early on. Why not run this? Of course you're going to run this. Why wouldn't you run this? Teferi's Protection. Ooh, this thing. Or it's Heroic Intervention on steroids. Because Heroic Intervention can't deal with board clears, like exile board clears, until your next turn, but this does. Your life total can't change, and you have protection from everything. All permanents you control phase out, which means they are not present on the board, which means while they're phased out, they're treated as though they don't exist. Whoa, man. That is some serious craziness. They phase out. They phase in before you're untapped during your untap step. Okay. Dude, this card, it's a juggernaut. Absolute juggernaut. I don't even want to like mention replacements for this card but you know, if you gotta, I don't know. I'll throw something on the board that you can. Worldly Tutor. Another tutor. Search your library for a creature card and reveal that card. Shuffle your library. Then put the card on top of it. This is a super important utility card in a lot of green decks, but this one as well, because we do have some creatures that are going to deal with unknown issues that you're going to run into with the people you play against. So as the board evolves, you're going to know what you need to go grab, because we have some really great utility creatures. All right, staple, Arcane Signet. Run it. Why wouldn't you? Of course. Add 1 mana of any color. Oh, we must be in mana ramp. So yes, run it. Absolutely. Why wouldn't you run this? You should run this in every single commander deck you have, period. Avacyn's Pilgrim. Add 1 white to your mana pool. It's a green drop. Well, helps us with our mana base. This is just an auto include in a white-green deck. Of course you're going to run this. Azusa. Lost but Seeking. 3 drop. We are mana ramping like madmen or women, depending on who you are. You may play 2 additional lands on each of your turns. And of course, man, women, everything in between. Because this is like 2020, y'all. Bird's Paradise. You should run this. Add 1 mana of any color. It's a 1 drop. Green. Helps with mana base. Run a bird. If you don't want to spend the money on a bird, run a mana dork. A 1/1 mana dork. Of course. It'll cost you like 50 cents. Farseek. 2 drop. Search your library for a plains, island, swamp, or mountain card and put it onto the battlefield tapped. Then shuffle your library. You may be asking, oh, well, what about Kadama's Reach? Well, this is a 2 drop, and this allows you to search for what we need. So that's why we're using this one over something like that. All right, Growing Rights of Itlimoc. This is a Gaia's Cradle, but not $400 worth. When Growing Rights of Itlimoc enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card from among them and put it in your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. This is the most important part at the beginning of your end step. If you control 4 or more creatures, transform Growing Rights of Itlimoc. Yes, which turns into a baby Gaia's Cradle. Yes, you should run this, but if you don't have it and it is a budgetary concern, then just put in something else that is going to allow for some mana ramp. Absolutely. In fact, Kadama's Reach. Kirametra, God of Harvest. Oh man, this is a great card. It's a 5 drop, 6/7, indestructible enchantment creature god. It has Devotion of green and white, which is fantastic. For 7. When you cast a creature spell, you may search your library for a Forester Plains card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. We are not going to have trouble getting land into the battlefield, folks, because we have all sorts of ways to do it. And what's really wonderful about this card, it is less than $3. Get this card if you don't have it, folks. Llanowar Elves, Mana Dork. Moving on. Lotus Cobra, just in the most recent set as a reprint, so the price has gone down a little bit. Yay, Wunderbar. Go pick one up. We're not going to talk about alternatives for this card because there aren't any. Landfall, holy moly. When a land enters the battlefield under your control, add 1 mana of any color. It does not get better than that for Mana Dorks. Whoa! And that's for each land. So if you drop 2 lands on there, you're putting two colored manas on of your choice. Woo! Tongue-tied. Mana Crypt. Of course. It's expensive. You don't have to run this. Put something else in. There's lots and lots of mana rocks you can put in that are not. Put in a Mind Stone. That's fine. Mana Crypt. At the beginning of your upkeep, flip a coin. If you lose the flip, Mana Crypt deals 3 damage to you. Add 2. Soul Ring for free? Yes, please. Yes, please, and thank you. Mirari's Wake. Creatures you control get +1/+1. Whenever you tap a land for mana, add 1 mana to your mana pool of any type that land produces. Woo-wee! Oh, yes, please. May I have another? Of course, not a cheap card. Again, put in like a Mind Stone. That is not going to cost you much at all. But this does have the added benefit of being a +1/+1 for your creatures, and it's going to double up your mana source. Oh man, this thing is just great. Nature's Lore. Search your library for a forest card and put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Land ramp. Oracle of Muldiah, 4-drop 2/2. You may play an additional land on each of your turns. Play with the top card of your library revealed. You may play lands from the top of your library. Again, it is an expensive card. Put in another Mana Dork if you need to. This thing is just fantastic. It's not really replaceable with a Mana Dork because you can play lands from the top of your library. So it's a Crufix. Crufix? Did I say that right? So yeah, put in a Crufix if you don't want to run this, because they are super affordable. Selesnya Signet. You can tap for green and white. Of course you're going to put that in. Smothering Tithe. Oh, this is a great card. And yes, definitely mana ramp. Whenever an opponent draws a card, that player may pay 2. If the player doesn't, which is frequently going to happen in the first few rounds, and you're playing against usually 3 other people, they're going to let you create a colorless treasure artifact token. With sacrifice this artifact, add 1 mana of any color. The reason this thing is near $20 is because it is fantastic. It is an auto include normally in white decks. That's why we have it here, because it is super powerful. It is just a great card. If you don't have it, it's kind of not a replaceable card. But again, sub it out for a Mana Rock if you need. But this is there for the Mana Ramp. And Soul Ring, play it. Of course, you should have it. Every Commander deck should have it. Talisman of Unity, same thing. Another Talisman. Another Mana Rock. Add green, white to your mana pool. And it's okay that we do 1 damage to ourselves. This is Commander, folks. It's Commander, folks. All right, now for the Shenanagans section of the build. Ancient Greenwarden. It's a 6-drop 5/7 with reach. This is a jankety jank awesome broken busted card. A little less busted because it's a 6-drop, but it's got reach, which we don't even care about in this build. You may play lands from your graveyard. Oh, thank you for Crucible of Worlds in a creature. If a land entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. Oh, landfall triggers an additional time? Oh, thank you very much. I will do so. This card is not replaceable. You just need to run this card in this build. So, moving on. Archon of Emeria. Oh, this is just kind of a hate card. Hate for your opponents. 3-drop 2/3 out of Zendikar Rising, flying. Good stats just for a flyer itself. As you've seen in some of our previous episodes when we're talking about Zendikar Rising, this is like 2 cards roll into 1. Each player can't cast more than 1 spell each turn, and non-basic lands your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. Ooh, that's just a hateful thing. Non-basic lands entering tapped, and you can't play more than 1. That is not going to hurt us, folks, because we're playing large creatures. We don't necessarily need to play more than 1 thing at a time. Aura Shards. This is a hate card too. A lovely hate card. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, which is going to happen frequently, you may destroy target artifact or enchantment. Ooh, keep that board stabilized. Wow, this is going to be a target on the board for sure with your opponents. Absolutely. I really recommend you picking one of these up. And it'll cost you less than $12. This is not really a replaceable card. It is just a super powerful white-green enchantment. Auspicious Starrix. This is in here specifically because of Scoot Swarm, which we'll get into in a little bit. Auspicious Starrix, it mutates for 6. Whenever this creature mutates, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile X permanent cards, where X is the number of times this creature has mutated. Put those permanent cards onto the battlefield. It's already got good stats, being a 5-drop as a 6/6, but this card is in here most primarily to mutate with Scoot Swarm, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Aven Mindcensor. This is another hate card. 2/1, 3-drop. It's got flash and flying, so you can flash it in at the end. If an opponent would search a library, that player searches the top 4 cards of that library instead. This is a tutor shutdown. I am shutting down your tutor, mister. No, you will not go search your library for the one specific combo card that you want. No, sir. No, you will not. Awesome. Awesome card, and is very affordable, running just less than $3. Avenger of Zendikar. Oh, we are talking serious shenanigans with this 7-drop 5/5. When Avenger of Zendikar enters the battlefield, create a 0/1 green plant creature token for each land you control, which is going to be a lot of them, people, because we are running a land on your battlefield heavy deck. Landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may put a 1/1 counter on each plant creature you control. Whoa, whoa, whoa. This card's awesome. Not replaceable, by the way, with some budgetary reason. So just man up, 1/1 up, and just get one. Darksteel Mutation. This is just some fun jank at a 2-drop enchant creature. This is board stabilization, protection. Enchanted creature is an insect artifact creature with base power, toughness 0/1, and has indestructible, and it loses all other abilities, card types, and creature types. You could totally hit their commander with this. Ha ha ha. What? Oh, but don't chuckle like that out loud, because that just wouldn't be very nice. And after all, we are playing with friends, right? Drannith Magistrate for 2, a 1/3. Oh, this is some more janky awesomeness that is shutting down stuff your opponent's trying to do. Your opponents cannot cast spells from anywhere other than their hands. Oh boy. Self-explanatory, folks. And it is not going to run you much. It is a $1.50. Pick one of these up for white decks, and especially this one. But pick this up because it's going to be an include in a lot of white commander deck builds. This is just a great card. Emeria Shepherd, 7-drop 4/4. It is flying landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may return target non-land permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. If that land is a plains, you may return that non-land permanent card to the battlefield instead. Oh, wow. I mean, wow. Landfall every time you get to do this? Fantastic. Not going to run you much either. Run this card in this build, or anything you're doing landfall heavy stuff with, for sure. All right, this one is a super interesting one. It is an expensive one. We do have a very specific alt card for this. Emil the Blessed. It's a 4-drop 4/4. For 3, you can exile flicker, basically. You can exile another target creature you control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. So if your creature gets targeted, this is a way to protect it. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 1 of green or white. If you do, oh, more counters. Put a 1/1 counter on it. If it's a unicorn, this part doesn't matter at all. Put 2 1/1 counters on it instead. Oh boy, this is great. Now, the alt for this card is going to be this nice little Eldrazi down here. It's got a 3-drop 3/3 devoid. This card has no color, not really relevant. For 2 and colorless, exile another target creature, then return it to the battlefield, tapped under its owner's control. So it's a less effective card because it comes back tapped. But it is an alternative card that is not going to run you what the Emilia's Blessed is going to run you. So, back to the Shenanagans card. cards. Grand Abolisher for 2 white 2/2. During your turn, your opponents can't cast spells or activate abilities of artifact creatures or enchantments. This is basically just saying, I'm not nice and you don't get to play stuff on your turn, especially if it's activated abilities or casting spells, creatures, flash creatures, enchantments. So nope, just shut that down. Shut it down. Shut it down. Heliod Sun Crowned. All right, folks, this is the Walking Ballista combo. So, indestructible. As long as your devotion to white is less than 5, Heliod isn't a creature. Whenever you gain life, put a 1/1 counter on target creature or enchantment you control. So for 2 here. So you got this out on the board. You got Ballista on the board. We have spoken about this in previous episodes, by the way. So you got both these out on the board. As long as you have, you drop this Heliod Sun Crown, you put the Ballista, as long as you have 2 mana left so that you can trigger another target creature gains life link until end of turn. You target your Ballista to give it life link. You remove a 1/1 counter and do damage. Now that damage has life link, so therefore you add another 1/1 counter on it because of Heliod Sun Crowned. Thus you have your infinite, where you can just keep pinging your opponents until they are dead. Love it. Or they intercede somehow. So that's your nice little infinite combo in here. Shenanagans! Knight of the Reliquary. Knight of the Reliquary gets 1/1 for each land card in your graveyard. Sacrifice forest or plains. Search your library for a land card. Put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. So, this obviously is so if you want to get some landfall action going on. For surezies. Won't set you back much either. Alright, Knight of Reliquary. We've got a couple more shenanigan cards. Oh, this is serious shenanigans right here. Linvala, Keeper of Silence. Itchy nose. 4-drop for a 3/4 flyer. Great stats, just that alone. Activated abilities of creatures your opponents control can't be activated. Oh, no thank you. You will not be doing anything of any sort on your side. But I will, but you won't. Activated abilities of creatures your opponents control can't be activated? Oh, wow. Not a replaceable card. Plus, you can tutor for this thing with a couple of the cards we have already mentioned. So if you need to go grab this creature, you can. And then shut some stuff down. Shut it down. All right, Scoot Swarm. Now, the reason we had that mutate so that we could mutate Scoot Swarm so that when you hit the landfall trigger, whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, create a 1/1 green insect creature token. If you control 6 or more lands, create a token that's a copy of Scoot Swarm instead. Let's hope you pull that combo off, because it will make you chuckle on the inside. Yes, it will. And Scoot Swarm, hey man, it is less than $5. It is less than $3 at the moment. I think this is a broken card. Check out our episode about how Scoot Swarm is a broken, busted card. And I love it. Love it. Turn to Timber Symbiosis. This is one of those bolt lands. On the other side, it comes in as an untapped land for 3 life damage. Fantastic. Or you can look at the top 7 cards of your library. You may put a creature card from it among there into the battlefield. If that card has converted mana cost 3 or less, it enters with a 3 additional 1/1. So even if those X green Hydras get grabbed out of those cards, it's still going to come in with a +1/+1 counter on them, 3 of them. But you can go grab for some of your utility creatures or whatever. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. This is just a fantabulous, fantastic, awesomeness, maximus card. You should include it for shizzle. And that is enough, the ending of our shenanigans portion. Now we got win cons, but also shenanigans. All right, win cons on Craterhoof. Haste. When Craterhoof Behemoth enters the battlefield, creatures you control gain trample and get X plus X plus until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. So basically, in summary, this is a game ender. This is gonna swing for some serious stuff. Now, this was worth noting that you can absolutely replace this for a lesser card, but still does a lot of the same kind of stuff. It's a 5 green 7/7 Vigilance Trample Haster. When end Razor Fort Runner enters the battlefield, other creatures you control get +2/+blue and gain Vigilance and Trample until end of turn. So it's just kind of like a baby little Craterhoof. Creature and enchantment spells you control can't be countered. Now that's fantastic. That's one reason it's in here, because it's a 2-drop 2/3. So creatures can't be countered? Oh, thank you. Because you're gonna run into blue people countering stuff. It's gonna happen. And for 4, target land you control becomes an XX elemental creature with trample. Ooh, that's the key. And haste until end of turn, where X is the number of enchantments you control. It's still a land. There you go, folks. Good card. Speaking of game winners, this is just a nasty card. Triumph of the Hordes for 4. Until end of turn, creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain trample and infect. Infect, check out one of our infect episodes right up there. Infect, of course, if you don't know, is if you give an opponent 10 infect damage, they lose the game. 10 infect, doesn't matter how much life they got. They could have 1,000 life. They get 10 infect, they lose. And if you're swinging with that many people because you're doing an end of the game, this is going to hit multiple faces and it's going to swing hard. Super hard. All right, next up, we got the draw mechanics. We got some draw action. Garruk's Uprising. Man, this is a surprisingly powerful card, especially with the kind of creatures we're playing. It's a 3-drop. When Garruk Uprising enters the battlefield, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, hey, give me an extra card. Creatures you control have trample. Oh my goodness, it does 2 things. Oh wait, it does 3 things? Whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, draw a flippin' card. For 3, and it's less than $1? What? Oh yes, we will add this in any kind of deck build that tends to have creatures with 4 or greater power. What? Yes. That's right, it's in there. Oh, this is a super powerful card. You can pick this thing up for less than $5. Runic Armasaur. It's a 3-drop 2/5. But this is what's really cool. Whenever an opponent activates an ability of a creature or land that isn't a mana ability, you may draw a card. Oh, man, that's going to be happening. Opponents are going to be activating abilities. It's going to happen. Okay, Sylvan Library for 2. As all of my colleagues say, and we all always say, this is a broken card in Magic. Need I say more? Run it if you have it. Absolutely, run this card. If you don't, just run a cheap drawing mechanic card. But this is certainly not replaceable. But budgetary reasons, just swap it out, folks. Swap it out. The Great Henge, this is one of the new ones. This thing has gone up in value. Holy moly, I'm glad I have a handful of them. Whenever I got this in draft, I picked it up because I was like, this is an awesome mana rock. I don't think everybody realizes how cool this thing is. Okay, blah, 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 blah. This spell costs X less to cast, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. You are most likely going to be dropping this for 2. I mean, just most likely. Or 4, man. I mean, you're going to have big creatures out. Add 2, you gain 2 life. Wonderful. Whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a 1/1 counter on it and draw a card. Woo-wee! This is just a fantastic card for +1/+1 grooviness that we're doing. I really recommend that you put this in, and I hope that you picked one up when they weren't so darn expensive. I mean, holy moly. Tireless Tracker. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, investigate. Which means put a colorless clue artifact token onto the battlefield with 2. Sacrifice this artifact. Draw a card. More draw. Whenever you sacrifice a clue, put a 1/1 counter on Tireless Tracker. Hey, see what we did there? You see what we did there? Some draw, some +1/+1. So there's no negative to sacking these artifacts. Oh, wow. And less than $5, folks. So definitely run this. Definitely. All right, we are into the lands section. So this is our land package. And that should finish it up. So we are running some staples, of course. Bountiful Promenade. Bountiful Promenade enters the battlefield tapped unless you have 2 or more opponents. Oh, well, you most indubitably will have more than 2 opponents, unless you're playing one-on-one. But you're not going to sub it out if you're not playing one-on-one. Brushland. Add 1 to your mana pool. Add green-white to your mana pool. Brush deals 1 damage to you. Pain lands, not a big deal. Again, for budgetary reasons, a lot of these are swappable. This is just, the cards that I'm running. Canopy Vista enters the battlefield tapped unless you control 2 or more basic lands, which is most likely going to happen, and is a cheap pickup. Command Tower. Oh, you should just auto-include this. You should absolutely run this. Add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. You should just always run Command Tower in every commander deck you have ever, period. Run this card. Just go run it. Spend the $10 and go get this card. But you most likely have it. Emeria the Sky Ruin. All right. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 7 or more planes, you may return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Yes, please. Yes, do that. Oh, absolutely. It's okay that it comes in tapped because that mechanic is Auspicious Maximus. And then you also have add white to your mana pool. So, hey, Wunderbar. Fabled Passion. Fabled Passage. When this thing came out, I was like, whoa. Fantastic card. I'm going to pick up as many as I see in draft or whenever I'm playing. And I did, folks. I picked this land instead of some great creature that could have helped me win whatever tournament I was doing that night. It's somewhat spendy, but not crazy. You should do this. Sacrifice Fabled Passage, search your library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield tap, then shuffle your library. And the best part is then if you control 4 or more lands, untap it. So it is an untapped land if you have 4 or more. Oh, Fabled Passage. It has become a staple. Flagstones of Tracker. You can swap this card out, but when Flagstones of Tracker is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you may search your library for a plains card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. Obviously, if you need to swap this out, put in another plains. Force. We are running a handful of them, 15. This one, absolutely you can swap out. Guy's Cradle. If you have one, run it. If you don't. You can put in another dual land or just put in another forest. What do we need to say about this? Add a ridiculous amount of green mana to your mana pool for each creature you control. Insane card. Moving on. In fact, I'll probably do a separate episode about how insane this card is. Plains. We're running 7. Savannah. Well, this is OG dual land. Old school. Doesn't cost you nothing because it comes in untapped and it's a dual land. And it's super ridiculously expensive. I have one. I run it. You don't have one. Do not run it. Put in another plains. Put in another tapped dual land. It's fine. You don't have to run that. Sunpetal Grove. This one's great. Sunpetal Grove enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a forest or a plains, which is statistically super likely. Add green or white to your mana pool. Cost you less than $5. Run this card. Temple Garden. Shocklands are always awesome. Cost you 2 life to have this come in untapped. Run this card. It came down in price a little bit because of the most recent reprint. Run this card. Temple of Plenty. This is probably the weakest of the dual lands, but you do get to scry. It does come in tapped, and you can pick one up for $1 or $2. So run this land. Windswept Heath. Pay 1 life, sacrifice Windswept Heath, search your library for a forest or plains card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Run this card, but be careful not to drop this onto the playfield if you have your commander out, because you will not be able to pay 1 life to sack this and go search for a card. That is one of the things that Yasharn does not allow you to do. So make sure you play this beforehand or when he's not on the board. You, of course, do not need to run this fetch land. You can put something else in that is a dual green-white. Certainly do so. All right, folks. That is the deck. Again, in review, we are ramping up our mana. We have mana fixes all over the place. We are utilizing what this bad boy does. More hateful stuff towards your opponent. Hopefully you still have friends at the end of this, because technically this is a casual commander deck. I wouldn't necessarily be running this at competitive EDH or anything. It would need some serious tweaks for CEDH, but that is not the scope of this episode. We have a lot of big beefy dudes that get super duper beefy the further along you get in the game. You drop down or have fetched for your doubling season, then all of this insanity is just getting super Gigantosaurus Rex. We have lots of protection in here. We have some great utility creatures like Grand Abolisher and the Blessed, which you can swap out, Shepherd. We just got all sorts of things that we can do. We got draw, which is super important in Commander, as you know. And we have some finishers. We have some real great finishers. If you haven't already started taking over the board and haven't been wrathed to death too many times, but you can come back from multiple wrathing situations, from exiles, from all that other stuff. So that, in summary, is the Hate Boars in Paradise. Yasharn, Implacable Earth. I think this is a very, very solid build. This is going to be super fun to play. You can swap out all sorts of things to make this a more budgetary conscious deck for yourself, but you can also play it as is. So enjoy the deck. Again, put in the comments, and thanks for tuning in. See you in the next episode.